snails can represent adaptability, the need to slow down and make the most of what you have at hand, which is perhaps why New Zealand artist and printmaker Toni Hartill has adopted the kauri snail as her totem animal. Exploring the trail through Toni's work takes us through papers that have been printed with textures, exquisite details, luscious layers, sheets that have been folded, cut and assembled into many new forms. Making has always been at the core of Toni's life, from graduating with a BA in Fine Arts, majoring in design and working as a bespoke furniture designer, to diving further into printmaking after leaving her high school teaching job. Toni has always been hungry to learn new things. From prints in tins to prints on walls, just like Alice in Wonderland, the viewer of Toni's work can marvel at the variety and scale and share the curiosity of nature, from forests to rock pools, exploring many forms through the translation of texture, pattern and colour to new surfaces. Often drawn to projects of an ecological nature, Toni has exhibited many works that explore history, culture, time and place. While being involved in many group shows and collaborations over the years, Toni has recently completed her first solo exhibition, Artful Narratives. With prints held in archives all over the world, her work in many forms, including on a beer label and magazine cover, her work is an outpouring of the ideas bouncing around in her head, a process Toni describes as catching the bubbles. So let's venture into this wonderland and say hello to Toni, who joins us from her home studio in Auckland today, and you wherever you are. If you are joining us live, please leave a comment and let us know where you are in the world. If you are catching up on a replay, we hope you enjoy the conversation and share it with your friends. So without further ado, let's kick off another fabulous season and welcome Toni Hartill, our 61st Friday feature artist.
Hello, Toni. And
hi, Tara. So nice to see you. And thank you for having me. And that was a lovely intro, my goodness.
So many things to talk about. And we've got lots of people here joining us today, which is just so wonderful. I mean, it's a crazy time zone. We've managed to kind of, depending on how late people are staying up in the US, we're at least managing Australia, New Zealand, and LA. So we've got hi from Washington. Amazing.
Oh.
So yes, so we've got so many people joining us, so that's so exciting. But we'll get straight into it.
Oh, Juliet.
We're definitely coming back to that snail.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at First of all, congratulations on your first solo exhibition, which is on until June 2nd in Auckland. And I just wanted to, let's have a little bit of a potted history. So we want to make sure that we get time to cover all the other bits and pieces we've got. So as a child or young adult, what kind of things did you find yourself making? Were you always making things?
Yeah, always making. I had a really practical, hands-on mum, and she taught me to sew. My grandma taught me to crochet. I was always trying handcrafts like macrame or embroidery or leather work, and I would end up making products that then I'd sell to family and friends or sell at markets and stuff. And when I was about 13, I started designing and building a doll's house. So that was when I really got into miniature worlds. But I'd always been making like little dioramas and shoe boxes and fairy gardens and old meat trays, or, you know, turning tinfoil into goldfish. And so, yeah, always making.
That's fantastic. I love that miniature world, and we'll be definitely talking more about that too, as it's something that I am obsessed with as well. Yeah. So after finishing your BA, you worked as a furniture designer. So I'm interested in what kind of pieces did you design, and do you think there's any takeaway methods or approaches to working that have stayed with you from that time?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I was doing domestic furniture, so designing bespoke to fit a certain place, a fitted decor, and I'd often do the interior decor as well. And yeah, I don't know, takeaway message. I guess I was always up for a challenge. I mean, when you walk into someone's house and meet a new client and they tell you what they want, you've first of all got to interpret what it is that they want. And then you've got to come up with a design that you hope they're going to like, and then build that in 3 dimensions. So there's so many different aspects to that whole process. And then you've got to work with a tradesman who's going to, a carpenter or whoever, who's going to make the piece, or the upholsterer. And so when you're working with lots of different people, that makes it really complicated. So I actually like making my own work for myself because I know what I want. Well, no, that's not true either.
But I guess also for me, I was kind of thinking, well, right from the get-go, you're already in that 3D space. You're not daunted by just having things flat on a wall. So,
no.
I need to get my head around that. That's that was good. I'm just going to welcome a few more people because we have lots of people joining us from all over the place. That's great. Thank you so much.
Oh, Rachel.
Excellent. So there are many forms of printmaking, and when you picked it up after teaching, what kind of printmaking did you start with?
Everything. I was just hungry to, like, the thing that drew me to printmaking is the mark making, just the effects that you can get. And so I was just hungry to try everything. And that was kind of the problem to start with, was that I would try one technique and then, I want to try, shiny thing, want to try that. And so I was doing like short workshops or mostly teaching myself and always moving on to the next thing. And then I realized that, wait a minute, I'm becoming a jack of all trades, but I can't do anything properly. So I would go to do an edition of something, create something for a particular project, and things would go wrong, and I would be like, well, is it the paper? Is it the press? Is there too much moisture? Is it the wrong ink? And so then I decided I really needed to focus down and stop trying everything, and really focus on things that I particularly enjoy, and that was really lino cut, dry point, and a lot of monoprint sort of techniques. So, and collograph. So I try to focus on that area and maybe branch out every now and then, but it's too easy to get distracted with too many.
Exactly. Now, I'm sure that quite a few people listening and watching are familiar with your work, but for those of them that are not, we'll just leap straight into some of the work. So in one of these pieces I'm about to show, so we've got this one here, There Be Treasures.
Yep.
Which, so, I mean, that, first of all, I'm kind of thinking, what kind of inks are you using that they're so opaque on that black? And
it's white paper. It's white paper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so that started with several layers of like monoprint to sort of give random kind of luminous color in the background, like really transparent color in the background, and then a layer of just an abstracty sort of, it was actually a splattered sort of a etched lino plate to give it some texture, which is that kind of really luminous teal color, to add to the sort of background color. And then it's 2 layers, I think it was a 2-block final lino cut of the underneath texture, and then the black is on top. And then I inked up the back of it fully with black ink, so it looks like it's actually on black card, but it's not. It started as white.
Wow. And the fact that it's not flat, that's so interesting. So, I mean, you must really enjoy that problem-solving process of how to tackle something a bit differently.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not until, like, people have talked to me about how do you do, and it's like, is that not... I mean, I guess I think in 3 dimensions anyway. So that's just, it's like if you imagine making a kid's party hat, it's like a cone that sort of, it starts as a flat piece of paper. You cut out a section and then you round it onto itself so it forms a cone. And then I cut out and perforated areas and added in pieces as well. And then it sits in a crocheted nest to support it. And so it's designed to either hang on the wall or to sit on a counter.
Wow. And then that's incredible. But I have to sort of keep moving because I've got a lot to do. And I think I came across you like, often I guess people do. You kind of appeared in my Instagram feed, and this forest one that I'm about to show has a couple of variations. So we'll start with this one, and it's fascinating that so many pieces make up this work. And it was a collaboration. Could you tell us more about how that came about?
Yeah, sure. So Forest Has the Blues, that was an idea that friend printmaker Celia Walker dreamed up. And so it's an ecological project looking at the significance and the fragility of forest remnants. And so there were 8 artists, and we each focused on either an invasive weed or that's my moth plant that I did. So, which is in New Zealand, the moth plant is a really invasive weed. So I did that as my main plant for the installation. And so each of those sections is about A2. And and each of the projects, so this second photo that you're looking at now is the second exhibition that we did called Murmurings. So again, the same artist plus one extra worked on this, plus we had 2 cohorts of high school students, senior students, join us to create works with that as well. And so in this second one, we included critters, so native insects and invasive pests like rats and possums and that sort of thing. So that went over from 2018 to 2019, 2 quite big installations and involving a lot of people, but there's such an amazing experience to be involved in a project like that. So, something like that, a lot of new ideas grow, and you don't know where you're going to end up. It's such a fantastic thing to be part of. Yeah.
And congratulations too for making the cover.
I know, that was amazing.
that was so cool. And so maybe related to those 2 last pieces, we both were talking earlier in the week and that we had both attended separately Diane Fogwell's workshop. And so was there, for me, there was a couple of things that made that a game changer in attending her workshop. Did you have a similar experience? We were talking tools.
Yeah, we would. Oh, yeah, we were talking tools, definitely. There were a couple of things. So she presented like her lino plates and her lino cuts, and she's known for incredibly fine lino cuts. And so that kind of blew my mind of how fine you can actually go. And she would use, she showed us her very expensive and amazing Japanese tools, but she also used, she had a jeweler's Dremel, which she had for us to use there, and that's a sort of quite an expensive option to use. But I, thought I didn't really want to commit to that, so I, just used the Dremel from Bunnings. And so if anyone doesn't know what a Dremel is, it's this gadget here.
Excellent.
With an extension, so that you're actually just holding like a pen, and you can pick these up really cheaply from a hardware store, and then you'll use just the burr bits, they're called, and that's a really large bit. I wouldn't normally use that. I would normally use these tiny ones, which are like less than 1 millimeter across. Wow. But you can get them in all different sizes, and you can just get them like for $1 a piece kind of thing from the local jewelry supply store, and that means that you can do that really fine or more drawn textures. So like in the rock pool, all around the edge, all that sort of rough, scratchy stuff, that's all with Dremel. Yeah, so all around the edge there where you've got that sort of scratchy, and also the bubbleweed, the Neptune's necklace bubbleweed, that's done with a Dremel. Oh, and the chitons are done with a Dremel because, to get into all those little corners.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, but often that process of lino cutting, can result in a bit of RSI because it's quite repetitive. And also, it can be quite tight. Like for me, I just find that and if that's not the look that you're going for, if you want something loose, I think that those tools take into a bit of lino with a power tool was.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can just do it with all sorts. Yeah.
And okay, so moving on to my next thing. So some of your work has a wonderful nostalgic kind of vintage from another kind of place and time and feel about it, which makes it so tactile. And so I wondered if you could tell us more about this piece, Field Notes.
Right. So yeah, that was I can't remember when that was, 2018 maybe. Right. And yeah, so that was my first time that I wanted to try and make an artist book in an edition, just to see if I could. But the starting point was I wanted it to be like a sort of a field notes journal, and it was inspired by my grandfather's logbooks, which are such tactile little personal objects anyway. And I just love that sort of personal journal, you know, where somebody who's been out in the field has sort of taken little notes and things. So that the drawing started from sketches from a sketchbook of mine that then I turned into dry points, and so printed up all the dry points, and then hand colored them with watercolor, and then the little leaves are done with colograph, and the inside, all of the work is printed, so it's all just cream Hanamulla paper that then I've printed fabric textures onto it, and the outside I've sort of layered in layers and layers of ink, transparent ink, to sort of create that suede-like look. So I just love that whole process of imitating reality and recreating it in a different form. And yeah,
that's so beautiful. And I just love, I mean, queen of layers. It's just how you get all that layering to come together to make that final piece is just amazing. So we've talked about lino printing and also the dry point. And Susan would like to know what type of printing press. And do you use the same press for everything, or different kind of methods?
All of my printing, I've just got a big etching press, so it's quite a large etching press, so it takes up to probably A1, maybe not quite A1, and
and I didn't fully appreciate that it takes it takes a bit of wrangling to actually get a piece of paper that size in and out of the press. Anyway.
Especially if you're doing something like etching and you've got to wet it so it's all soggy as well.
And speaking of etching, Susan also wanted to know.
No, I haven't done copper. I'd love to try, but
it's all about that matrix, isn't it? Having the sort of acids and baths and all of those things, and other equipment.
One copper sulfate, and I like stuff to be non-toxic and easily accessible at home, you know, where I can work in my home studio. So with something like copper sulfate, that's easily and safely done at home.
And so also we were talking about the idea of intention and whether you know what the end result's going to be. I can't pronounce this, but I'll ask you to talk a little bit more about the project and background in this particular book.
Right. Yeah. So Kagatia is so that came about as a part of the Forest Has the Blues exhibition. Each of the artists did their own research on an area of their own, a native tree or forest remnant that they wanted to sort of focus on. And so I decided on the Kagatia tree. And and so the Kagatia tree in New Zealand was one of our largest trees, and 98% of the forest, the original forest, is now gone due to a lot of it was used to turn into butter boxes to ship butter to the UK, and the swamps were turned into pasture for dairying. And so I really wanted to communicate that bit of history in creating that butter book, and also the Once a Grand and Noble Forest sort of tells that story as well.
Okay, so there's Once a Grand. These are the other little books that went with the butter book. Wow. And again, it looks like you've used those layering too of both papers and textures too.
Yeah, so that book includes some layers of tracing paper where I've printed onto the tracing paper. So as the pages turn, the forest sort of thins out and becomes ghostly until it sort of gradually disappears to just remnants, which is what we see today, is just these sorry little scraggly remnants that look so sad.
Oh, yeah, that's just beautiful. Which feeds next into my next question. So, you know, I guess many people often try lino printing at school, and maybe then the experience ends for them there, or if it continues. But I love the idea that, you know, you're working also with this idea of textured plates that become less about sort of, you know, drawing in a traditional sense and more about, I was going to say hacking, but that's a bit expensive. You know, just, yeah, making textures and working with layers. And I saw that you had these cascade books. So would you say that was an example of that layering?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that was something else that I got from Diane Fogwell. She talked about creating texture blocks. She sort of introduced that idea, rather than creating a lino block to create a finished image, that you create these texture plates that then you can reuse in different ways. And so yeah, those cascade books were also part of the Forest Has the Blue sort of series of works. And yeah, and also playing with the layers of transparent material over the images below, and the idea that you would lift up, you know, peek under the layers to see what was underneath there. So yeah, all really experimental.
Yeah, that's just, yeah, so beautiful. And we were also, because we did a test call just to try all our tech earlier in the week.
Brief call.
And we were talking about how neither of us are particularly fans of the idea of, you know, printmaking in the traditional sense, in terms of printing editions, where you print multiples of exactly the same. And so, have you always had a experimental and playful approach to creating, and where do you think that comes from?
Well, I used to paint, and I wasn't experimental when I painted. I used to plan out the entire painting, and I would do a full color pastel and work out all the colors, and then I'd grid up the canvas, and then I'd paint the painting, and it looked like the pastel drawing. And now I just cannot imagine who that strange person was, because that's not how I work at all. I don't know who that was. And I guess that was to do with confidence, maybe. So now when I'm working, I have ideas and I have a plan maybe, but probably 90% of the time the ideas will start branching off in different directions, and I'll maybe end up working on 3 or 4 different projects related to the initial idea, and it's just gone off in different directions. And printmaking, I think, really allows that. It allows you to be spontaneous and responsive, and because you can print multiple, you know, you can be printing multiple pieces of paper and playing with different ideas while you're working. It allows you to sort of take an idea in multiple different directions at once and see which one you want to stick with. So, yeah.
And I guess the idea of that being experimental to some people would be, you know, seem like the opposite, because in some ways printmaking is so structured, because, you know, with lino print, you kind of need to know which bits are obviously going to cut out and which bits are going to leave. And even to, you know, etching and those sorts of things, sometimes you still need to have a sense of where it's going when you start. But then, yeah, as you say, that's beautiful to be able to have that more experimental thing and just be able to respond to what it's like painting, so it becomes freer. So, yeah, that's...
Well, even with lino cut, you know, when I remember doing a plate for a specific project, and I'd planned what the image was going to be. And while I was cutting, it was sort of a landscape scene on the far riverbank. It was to do with gold mining. And then in the foreground was the river and looking into the water. And as I started to carve away the water, and I used a big gouge, which I thought I was going to clean out all of the water, and I just did these quick couple of strokes across the lino to remove some of the lino, and I suddenly thought, gosh, I really just like those marks. And so I just stopped right there, and I wouldn't have designed that into it, but just that rough and ready quick strokes really, you know, like, so now I try to, when I draw up my lino, I try to allow for free cutting, just to let the mark making speak for itself and not get too pre-planned about it.
Susan has a couple of other questions. She'd like to know if you make your own paper.
I have made some paper, and that's where the little, I don't know if you, I'm not sure if you've got the photo of the little folly book, the little twiddly, like a little globe book.
Oh, not the one behind you, like the, no.
That's what it came, that's what the little folly one, which is in my exhibition, became that this is a bigger version. So I made this paper and then turned it into this little number.
I know, that's incredible.
Oh yeah, that's folly. Yeah, so that was a paper making workshop that I did with Beth Sargent, just sort of spur of the moment, and she had a little model of that design of structure, and I just loved it so much. And so you can actually remove each of the pages. The pages are all connected, like each one is wrapped onto a little piece of dowel that then all gets connected into the main structure. And so that was an example of play. You know, I went to do a paper making workshop and ended up making paper all weekend, and stuff happened.
And so I guess following on from that, I guess it depends on what structure or object suddenly comes into your sphere.
Yes, Susan, I absolutely use recycled materials. So like on this, you know, that's copper plumbing. Ooh. And some plumbing fitting, and the top of a ballpoint pen.
I love the plumbing aisle at the hardware store. You know, you see all the
basement
things. I mean, it's not recycled when you're buying it in the hardware store because it's actually new, but I just kind of think, oh yes. But then I kind of get home and go, I don't know how to attach these things. They just I just put foliage in them and that's it. Anyway, enough about it. So then I kind of, going back up to my pictures, this one, scattered installation. So I love the fact that that's all bits and pieces, like a tick. I love that. And that it's not framed. So can you tell us more about that and how it came into being?
Yeah, so that was an exhibition. There were three of us, group exhibition, Celia Walker, Al Anderson and myself. And so called Scattered. And we all started with the same quote from a book as a starting point to do with lost landscapes or faraway places. And we all sort of went in a different direction. And so it's sort of made up of lots of little wee pieces, like field notes almost, of memories of places and times and things. And it was just a really fantastic project to really get that whole playful experimenting going on. And that's when I started making those little dioramas and tin cans, which was really fun. And and we'd hoped to have one of the gallery spaces, but we were assigned just the narrow hallway. So in a way that was a blessing in the end, because we had a really limited space in which to hang the work. But it was actually really nice that it became almost like a big work in itself, but all held on the wall with pins and magnets. So and then that's when I took it down and all of the pieces stacked into like this little bundle it was such a lovely little bundle. And I thought, well, how can I recreate that bundle in a book form that can be more long lasting? And that inspired a later work that's in my current show called Remnant. So you just don't know where the ideas are going to come from.
Yeah, I love that. And just like you were saying before, where you had that textured fabric, and then how you've created the feel of that too. I mean, it is so tactile. You do just want to get in there and have a bit of a pick up and a flick through that. That's amazing.
Yeah, so there's lots of bits of ephemera in there, you know, old envelopes and bits of old charts, and you know, that then I've sort of worked ink into to sort of age them and stitched into them and everything.
Yep. Maud, it absolutely is beautiful. Yeah, thank you. So that's gorgeous. And so then I was thinking, I'm back to how I discovered more of your work, and just seeing this piece too. Again, I was blown away, and I was just this idea of putting things in tins and this miniature world. And so being drawn to that idea of mini worlds in a tin, where do you think that fascination with mini worlds comes from, and how did this piece come about?
Yeah, I don't know. I just always just loved mini worlds as a place to escape to, really, and just imagining myself. I mean, even now, if you watch an amazing film, when your imagination just goes, crazy about going into a different world. And so that piece, that was designed to go into the Print Council of New Zealand, Thinking Unfolding Artist Book exhibition. And the idea with that exhibition was to get people to challenge what the idea of what an artist book is. So I thought, right, well, it's not going to have pages. So I thought I'll use tin cans. And because I'd been making the dioramas, I thought, well, how can I use the diorama idea and have it as a book? And so each of those, the idea is that it's a 7-day, there's 7 little dioramas that fit inside the outer cover. And so it's like a log book of 7 days at sea, sort of reminiscing about my, days diving and going boating with my brother. And so we'd just come back from a trip to the Cavalli Islands. And so a lot of that is about the scenes of the Cavalli Islands, coming home or diving at the Poor Knights. That one on the top at the back there is very much the Poor Knights. And and so I designed the outer cover to be like looking at old food cans. So thinking about like old food cans that might be knocking around in the boat. And when you go to sea, you're quite happy. You get really hungry. You're quite happy to eat the sort of plainest of foods, or old food, old tins. Everything tastes delicious at sea. And so I really wanted to sort of play up that whole thing, and just then the idea of vitamin C, fuel for heart and soul.
Vitamin C, yes.
This is one of the, like a little.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's just a tin can that then it's covered with print. And
did you have to eat a lot of tuna?
Are you seasick yet?
Wow, that's so amazing. And I was wondering that too. Anne wanted to know if you'd been influenced by Fiona Hall. She has the sun.
Yeah. I have seen her work. I saw her work when I was teaching, actually. The previous teacher had a big display of her work. But actually, until you've just mentioned her now, I hadn't really even thought. Thought of her work. I must have a look.
Yes, we are as well. I mean, both of those things absolutely true. And Rachel appreciates showing all those. I mean, you're so generous with
thanks, Rachel.
You're so generous with all that you share. I mean, I know you have an amazing blog, and you have lots of links and resources on your website too. And that idea of sharing ideas is just, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now, where am I up to? Oh, so this idea of time spent in our creative spaces and giving ourselves permission to play, and the idea of that notion of, what we should be doing. And I mean, this should thing, instead of playing. Yeah, I mean, where do you think that notion comes from, and how do you think people can access sort of the idea of more play? Or I guess, for you in the week, how do you decide to work on which day or week? Are you driven by deadline or feel, or?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, deadline's always a good motivator, and sometimes when you're just not motivated, you're just not in the mood. It's really, that's what I find the hardest, is when life has got in the way and I've stopped creating for all manner of reasons because I've got to deal with other things in my world, and then trying to get back into the studio and get starting. That can be a really horrible space to be in, because you just don't know where to start. And that's where, like, keeping sketchbooks and keeping a record of ideas of things that you want to work on and inspiration sort of live in your sketchbook, so that when you get stuck, you just open it up and you've got a starting point. And I think often a starting point is just doing some of the mundane stuff, about even if it's tidying your studio or getting set up to start something. But having, I don't work very well if I have to create something that's got to be finished and it's got to meet a brief like right now, because then I think that stops the play. So I have done work in the past where I've been commissioned to do something for a commercial job, and I've got 2 weeks in which to design it, make it, finish it, print it, send it. And that's not my best work, whereas if I've got time to sort of really experiment, that's when the fun starts happening. And you come up with unexpected things and you're going to get much better work. And so, yeah, I think allow yourself time and not pressure. Although some people seem to only work under pressure, which for me, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's why I've done my latest print, and it's not due till September, but I've done it.
Excellent. So speaking of pressure, and inevitably the L word and lockdown is going to come up. And so I was looking at a piece that you created during that time, because we were talking also earlier in the week how during lockdown people had access to what essential items, and you were saying that you could have had a zillion paper clips, but finding printmaking supplies was actually more difficult. So so this was a piece that you created in lockdown. So I'm intrigued, to more about, how did you know how to construct that was my first. So did you want to talk a little bit more about how that came into being?
Yeah. So we were working, Celia, Al and I were working towards a follow-up exhibition to the scattered one. And like you say, suddenly we're in lockdown, and I couldn't access printmaking supplies, and I couldn't commit to doing printmaking because we didn't know whether it was on again, off again the whole time. And so I ended up just like photographing in and around my home. Like this was the first big lockdown when we were like stay home, and we were very much contained. And so I just started photographing my own home, not with a view to it being for the exhibition, but also, I guess you can blame Instagram for the square format of photos. So those initial little box structures were from lots of little square photographs that I just started to look closer and closer at my own house, inside and outside, thinking about in a box, out a box, outside, I guess being locked in your own house, you're like inside these four walls, driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And so, but then it just became really absorbing. It made me look closer at my own house and look at, and then at the garden and photographing the garden. And so, it was kind of, I guess, thinking boxes. It was just a logical progression. And then I just started so this is a little one that didn't quite make the cut, but so it's, each side is got little photographs of little snippets of the house that then it unfolds. And then, photographs of the garden. And so it's like up here, it's like, thinking of my garden as being contained as well. And then looking up to the blue sky, like imagining that my whole section is contained in a glass box and I can't get out. So it's that whole containment sort of thing. And then peering through fences. And so those ones, I started sort of playing with, like I was lingering in the garden and peering through the fences, and so you get these, I was playing with this structure where you've got these little shapes and cutting out things so that then you're actually peering through from behind. So
But when you say just cutting up and just folding and peering, then it all actually works and it looks so seamless, like it was meant to be. It's amazing. Wow.
It was very therapeutic.
Molly would like to know what percentage of your beautiful prints are eventually cut up for other beautiful work.
Probably a lot. 83.7%.
That's a rough guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything that's been sitting in a drawer that hasn't sold, and I'm like, I don't know that I'd ever exhibit that again. That's sort of up for the chop. And I always keep, like failed prints or, prints that didn't quite make the cut. I've got a drawer full of stuff, and you'll always use stuff. It'll always get chopped up. So.
And one of your pieces reminded me of a Victorian diorama that my father had, and it was a piece that I was always secretly coveting, that idea of peering into another world. What inspired you to create Rockpool Theatre?
Yeah, well, so that's like the Victorian tunnel book, and I always, I've always been fascinated by the tunnel book, and it comes in all different sort of structures and formats. But again, with printmaking, you have that ability to be able to produce lots of prints that you can then chop up, and they become less precious because you can just keep creating the work and chopping it up. And but anyway, I had a whole series of square prints, sort of experimental prints that I'd made, and I thought, wow, that's just the perfect thing waiting to be chopped up and then turned into a tunnel book. So yeah, that's a really fun piece.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then I'm just going to skip straight to this one. So this is your remnant piece, and it's just so tactile. I mean, you really literally want to explore it. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so that's the one that was inspired by the bundle of when I took down the work from Scattered, and I had all the little pieces all stacked in a bundle, and I thought, oh, that's just such a lovely little bundle. How can I create that? And so this book was made using a child's board book. Oh, you can sort of see it in that photo on the right-hand side. You can see the board book. So I've cut the board book down on the bench saw and then cut holes in it to make windows, and then sort of glued in various layers and ephemera, and it's kind of gets made up as it goes along. I have some pieces that I start with as the main piece for each page, but then I just keep adding and layering, and so there's flaps and bits that pull in and out, and yeah, really fun piece.
And something like that, I mean, knowing that you've just installed your latest exhibition, it must be quite challenging to find the right venue to display them. And I noticed this is from the current exhibition, and that you've got the screens above the cabinets. So yeah, how's that been going, and are you happy with how that all came together, the exhibition?
Oh yeah, it's been amazing. Yeah, so this is at the Takapuna Library in Auckland, and this is the Angela Morton room, and they've got this beautiful little exhibition space with all these glass cabinets, and so for a start, to have all of the cabinets where you can present the work safely when you're not there overseeing it is really important. So in a normal gallery, it's so often it's not safe to present work if it's not going to be watched. Some work is just too delicate to just let it sit there. And so yeah, that was really good, and having that much space to be able to present all of my work as a large body of work so it can all be seen all in context. And then the slideshow, it's quite a long slideshow that has a lot of making and process photos in amongst it, so you can see the books sort of open and in different forms. And then I've been doing regular talks, which have all been amazingly well attended, and people are just really interested to come along and to see the books being handled and get to sort of see inside the books and hear about them. So yeah, the whole thing's just been absolutely amazing, and yeah, so much fun.
Yeah, just to see all of those things in one place is amazing. So I'm jealous and in awe of many things, and one of those is that you can use power tools and that you can use them.
Anyone can use power tools, Tara.
I did a course. I even did a course, Women and Power Tools, but then I got home and it was so much of emphasis about all the things that could go wrong and all the injuries that could happen. But yeah.
Oh no, woman is sensible. You'll be fine.
The other thing that I'm jealous of is that you totally nailed the Blizzard book.
Oh, the Blizzard box.
Yes.
Oh.
I mean,
isn't that like magic?
Yeah.
So that's from The Art of the Fold, which I highly recommend. Absolutely amazing book on folded structures.
That's
and
amazing.
Yeah, and so that is such. So I think in the book you only make 3 sections, and so of course I was like, well, I need more sections than that.
And do you have any advice for those of us that are trying to perfect our folds and constructions? Is the key in the paper or the bone folder, or just patience?
Yeah, all of the above. So this is just brown paper, like brown packaging paper, which is really nice to work with. And a lot of the structures, because they're so long, of course, they require you to start with a long piece of paper.
Yeah.
So, you know, brown paper comes in rolls. It's really easy. You know, it's a really good thing to use, and it folds really nicely. So I think, you know, if you're practicing structures, use brown paper or something like that. And yeah, being precise with your measurements. I have one of my most important tools is I've got the biggest size cutting board, you know, the green cutting boards, cutting sheets with all the grid. That's so good to use. I use it, it just lives on my worktop, and I use it all the time when I'm paper cutting or folding or everything, because you can put markers on it and use it to make sure that you're cutting square and you're folding square, and, you know, so that's just fantastic. Yeah.
And I've got these too. And then you've taken it to a next level and added paper weaving in the bottom left there.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's all new work that I'm sort of just starting with new ideas and a whole new body of work for an exhibition and residency next year. So I'm just sort of experimenting with playing at this stage with ideas of where I'm going with this work. But weaving with the paper. So that's just, again, brown paper that I'm weaving with. That sort of came because I when I was paper making, this is how ideas go kind of left field. When I was paper making, I had some leftover pulp that then I thought, oh, I wonder what if I put them onto some leaves, and then I ended making these paper pulp leaves, these kawa leaves, which are a medicinal plant in New Zealand. And then I wanted to create a box or some way of turning these leaves into some sort of book structure. And so it was only natural for me to want to weave a paper like first aid box. It made sense at the time. Anyway, so I started weaving paper and just found that just weaving the paper is fantastic. It's just beautiful. And so, you know, I've been making these are like little kitties that then I've got a little, what are these called? Are these a blizzard book? It's a blizzard book. Yeah, again, out of the Art of the Fold book. So, you know, with just little bits of ephemera and whatnot stuck in. And, but just really experimental, playing with pattern and texture and material, you know, like the whole tactile thing, thinking about what the materials are and why you're using them and how they get used. And, and so one of the ones that I did was, which is really beautiful, I have this huge roll of old tracing paper. And so I tried weaving out of tracing paper, and it just creates this really delicate, beautiful, translucent structure. So, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. Again, you've made that weaving process look very simple, and it looks like something that's over and under. But I did recently do a workshop where that was actually the task, and you kind of sort of undo and do at the same time. So it's
I did some online tutorials. I think it's something like, it's a New Zealand series of tutorials on YouTube called the Flaxworks or something like that. And it does get to a point where it becomes like, what do you mean? And, you know, I couldn't work it out. And they do say that the tutorials are for a more experienced weaver. And so then I put aside the tutorial and just thought about it logically and thought, well, how is it supposed to go? What should I do? And worked backwards from there. And then it just kind of made sense. So it wasn't actually so complicated.
Wow. Just along, so I just want to show people some shots of your little bunker here. That looks amazing.
Yeah, this is my basement studio workshop.
Yeah, and the press.
That's my old mangle that we converted. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so I don't tend to use that so much now because I acquired quite a big, larger press. So, but yeah, the mangle sits in my studio, and I like to turn the handle.
Now, at the beginning of the intro, the snail did appear, and that snail has also appeared on Instagram quite a lot. And that was another thing, that connected me to you straight away. And so you had all of those textures, but then you do something like this, which is so, again, kind of worldly and detailed. And so this was a piece that you created, I believe, in lockdown. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the one on my left, the dome one, that was done for a print exchange that, again, Celia Walker, she got together a group of printmakers from across New Zealand. I think there were about 16 of us. And the print exchange was called Distant Conversations, and it was right at the beginning of the first big lockdown. And so it was to do with, our own personal experiences in lockdown. And so that's called Stick to Your Bubble, because it was very much about stay contained within your own home, don't mix your bubbles. And there were lots of TV advertisements about, to try and explain what a bubble was and everything. And because I've been working on snails and I just like the whole thing behind snails, I thought it was a perfect thing to do. And then the second one, whether he's in a jar and the lids come off, that's called a cautious reopening. So I'm the one in the jar, kind of like checking it out, thinking, I'm not sure yet.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, I do have a question about paper from Juliet.
Tissue paper, yes, really fragile. I have printed onto tissue paper and used it for like shin collet, but it's so fragile when it gets wet that that's the thing that I find quite hard. I know that you can use like tea bag paper, and I haven't yet got a good supply of that, but working with those thinner papers. I think some of the rice papers give really tissue-like qualities, but they're much stronger.
Yeah. I did have some tissue paper for Shinkalay the other day with the rice paste glue. And there's moments where it's all a bit touch and go, where it kind of just disintegrates straight away. But that's interesting to work with, because it does have those beautiful layers. So we're nearly to the end, but I also wanted to show this piece too, because I loved how it flips. So you've got the creative coach and the critic both in the same print. Could you explain a little bit more about how that came about?
So that, I really enjoy experimenting. I love carving lino, and I really enjoy experimenting with that sort of illustrative side. But one of the things I was talking before about when I stopped creating and trying to start again, the noise in my head of the critic is overwhelming sometimes, of, why would you bother? It's not going to work. Nobody will want it. What's it for? This whole noise going on in your head. And I don't think I'm alone in that sort of experience. So I and also talking to a few creative friends, both writers and visual artists, they sort of talk about their own experience. And so this image was all to do with that, about so the critic. So this is one of the versions I've done. So the critic is all, new shoots are sort of withered and blowing away in the wind, and it's all sort of very dark and gloomy and rough seas and storms and etc. And then versus the ideas taking flight and much more sunnier disposition and fish. I've put all sorts of things in there that have symbolism and, the positive and negative. And I just kind of really liked the idea that you could have a piece of work that was framed in such a way that you could, depending on your mood, you could flip it on your wall in different ways. And so, that was, another thing about lockdown, I guess, when you've got plenty of time at home alone in your own head. So that for me helped me a lot to sort of silence the critic. So
I think a lot of people would relate to that. So is that a print that you have in your online shop? Because
that's right.
Just that having that on the wall and would resonate, I think, with so many people. I think I'd just, some days I'd actually get something out and mask over the critic and make him go away completely. That's incredible. So, wow. So we're nearly at the end of our talk. We were also talking the other day about how you use a workshop journal, and you said that future Toni often appreciates the work of past Toni. So how important is the journal to you, and what's the process of using it?
Everybody, are you listening? Everybody should keep a workshop journal, because future Toni gets really cross when she doesn't know what she did a week ago or a month ago or a year ago. And so so this is my workbook 2. I'm currently just about through workbook 3, but so in it I keep, when I'm working, I don't necessarily do it while I'm working, or sometimes I do if I'm being organised, but I keep swatches, colour swatches. I make notes of what inks I've used, what mediums I've mixed them with, you know, what my recipes were, like there's a little diagram here explaining how I've set up the registration on the press to do this particular print. Yeah, like when I'm experimenting with lots of different textures and stuff, and I'm wanting to sort of know, well, did this work or don't do that? You know, that's the main thing, is what didn't work, so that when I go to try something again in the future, I know, well, I can look back at what I did and know not to do that again, because I just got fed up with making the same mistakes and not progressing. So
wow,
yeah, really important.
Yes. If we take one takeaway away from this, it's we need to create ourselves little workshop journals.
Absolutely.
Denise says that she's been waxing tissue paper. So yeah, really interesting. Yeah,
that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, that's a good tip. So, oh yes, and then I was looking at your blog and website and seeing that you got awarded a lifetime membership to the Print Council of New Zealand. And I was wondering, could you tell us more about your role with the Print Council and how it came about, but also, you know, the importance of being part of a like-minded community? Is that something that, you know, you find very valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I decided to sort of focus on my arts practice, that was the first thing I did, was make connections, build community. And so I started seeking out print groups or interested people in the Auckland area that I could connect with. And, you know, so community is so important. And so Print Council of Aotearoa New Zealand, PCANZ, I joined them, I think, back in 2014, and in 2016 I became a local rep for the Auckland Northland region. And so I worked I resigned at the beginning of this year. I decided it was time to actually focus on my own work and to sort of take a step back from doing voluntary work for a while. And so it was such an honour to be awarded the lifetime membership. And that was just because I, you know, do what all the volunteers do. We all work really hard. It's a volunteer organisation that sort of nationally supports fine art printmaking. There's a really good website. They run workshops, summer schools, like the collaborative print project that I've just been working on, which you can see on Instagram. So there's lots of activities, and also it connects people within the regions so that, you know, you're working and can connect with other people to share your ideas and work and critique each other's work and everything. So absolutely important. Yeah.
And so when you're sharing
a lot of these people here.
When you're sharing ideas, are you literally meeting up in person? And is there a sort of formality to that? You know, do you have
Yeah, it's sort of within the regions. Different regions sort of have their own print groups and support groups within the area. But you tend to meet people, you know, like with summer school and things like that, or collaborations, you meet other people across the regions. And one of the things I did was I created a national print group register, which is on the website. So you can go to this Google map and you can see where print groups and public print studios are all over the country. And so you can plan a really good road trip.
Excellent. Yes. I mean, camper fan too. Anne says, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Lots of amazing.
So
as we nearly get to the end of our hour, I mean, what are you working on now and what are you looking forward to?
Oh, so much to do. The next thing is I'm working toward, been invited to do a solo exhibition next year down in Opanaki, and to do a residency down there. So that's so exciting. I'm so excited about that. So I'm just sort of starting to build up ideas about where my new work's going to go. And plus there's a number of other smaller sort of projects in between that, you know, ideas to work on and work collaboratively with different people. So there's actually so much to do.
All those bubbles that you're chasing.
I know, too many bubbles. That's what I worry about, is losing my bubbles.
Yeah. Well, it's been amazing. I've just loved so much hearing about all of those things and seeing all of your pieces. I mean, it's a shame that I can't get in there with my white gloves and have a little bit of a closer look, but the next best thing and the closest I could get.
So, we'll come to Auckland.
Yeah. No, I'm so going to have to organise that. So, I mean, it's been great. And thank you so much for taking time to be our Friday/Saturday feature artist.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. And it's been so much fun to meet you and talk with you too.
My crazy ramblings.
So, no. We'll have to make a habit of it.
Yeah. As we say goodbye to Toni, I'm going to play an outro and I'm going to pop up your comments of gratitude and thanks. So keep putting in those comments and I'll try and flash them up for Toni. And thanks again so much. Yeah, it's been fabulous. So hang on there a bit longer and I'll just play our outro. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
See you
Bye,
next
everybody.